In this video, I'm going to do a breakdown of the 13-piece modular sci-fi minimalistic static mesh set. And I'm going to show you how to use it, all the features in it, and how to get started creating environments with it very quickly. Now, if you want to grab this 13-piece sci-fi minimalistic modular set, all these assets are available on WoLD Design Patreon. Just simply become a supporter, download these, begin to use them, and to create with them. And in addition to UE5 static meshes, I also included all the FBX files, all the textures, and a Maya scene file. So you get everything you need to create with and make any modifications if you choose to do so. Make sure you check out the video for how to make these meshes work with your project, where to place the folder so everything shows up correctly and everything works. So once you have the assets placed inside your project, go ahead and open it up, and there'll be 4 subfolders. It contains one map, materials and material instances, static meshes, and textures. Everything is organized so you can find everything quickly. Let's go ahead and open up the map, and inside this map I've created a simple small environment to see what's possible and how some of these meshes are used, as well as if you go outside you'll see all the meshes displayed in the same level, so this way you know what you're getting. This small environment is just an example, but of course you can create a wide variety of interior spaces, of corridors, of hallways and rooms by using these meshes together. So this is just an example of what you could do, but you can of course expand on it further. The one thing to note is this environment does not contain any light sources, so I just have lights placed above on top of the ceiling to simulate where the light would be coming from, but you need a light source, some kind of a lamp or light, so it doesn't look this odd where the light has no source and they're just emitting from somewhere. If you want to grab something to use, I do have a 5-piece set of lights that you can download from WoLD Patreon, or you can just create your own and use. Then inside the materials folder, you will find all the materials as well as material instances to use. I'll cover how to use some of these in just a minute. Then inside the static meshes folder, you have all 13 static meshes. And the way you use static meshes is pretty simple. There are a few things you need to keep in mind. So after you drag any of these meshes, everything will be snapped to the grid and it will stay on the grid. It's very important that you use the 10-unit grid system to build your environments using these meshes. So this way when you duplicate meshes, they can be snapped together to each other. You can go down to 5 units. It'll make it a little harder to snap because the grid system, the grid unit size is a lot smaller. So you'll just be a lot more careful how you have to snap these so they don't overlap or you don't create gaps. But everything will be snapped at 5 to 10, and I recommend using 10-unit grid system to make things easier to work with. And of course, make sure that you have the grid snapping enabled. When it comes to working with a door and a doorway, I want to show you one very important thing. So when you have a doorway, you can have it as is, or you can place a door. So you have a door that you can use to block that off, close it off, and then use it so you have an openable door. When you use the door within the doorway, there is a pivot point on it that's very specific. It's let me move this out. The pivot point is on a back corner of the mesh of the door right here. So if I zoom in a little closer, you can see the pivot point is right there on a corner vertex. This determines which way this door can be opened. So if you see the pivot point right here on the bottom left, the only way this door can be opened is in, like so. This will prevent any overlap with the door and the doorway. So if I place this door into that doorway, I have to be very careful. And actually, let me go inside this environment. There's going to be some light in here. It'll be a little easier to tell. Let me actually move this light, like so. So this door right here, the pivot point is right here in the corner. And in order to place the doorway and the door correctly, so the door aligns with the doorway, make sure you lower the grid down to 5. You can use the bracket keys to lower the grid or increase the grid. Left bracket key will decrease it, right bracket key will increase it. So I'm going to go down to 5, and you need to go down to 5 for the door in order to place it into the doorway. And let me go ahead and delete it. So you would drag the door, and you need to make sure that you place the door into the doorway right here, right on the edge of the doorway. So the door frame will align with the door at its pivot point right here. If you do a little further out, when you start opening the door, it might begin to overlap and create a bit of overlap where the door and the door frame is. So in order to make sure that that doesn't happen, you need to place that door flush at its pivot point with the door frame right here. This will prevent any overlap and it will make the door open correctly. Now, because that pivot point is very important, whichever way it's facing, so that closest vertex, that's where the door needs to open to. If you try to open the door the opposite way, it'll still work, but you're gonna get overlap on the other side. It's gonna start overlapping the frame, as you can see right here. So the placement and the rotation of the door, very important. Lower down to 5 unit grid system. Place it so it flush with the door frame, depending where the pivot point is. So if it's back here, this is the part where it needs to be flush with the door frame. And then in this case, it will be open towards me, towards the camera right here. And if you want to make the door openable to the other side, one of two things you can do. You either rotate the door and then position it the opposite way. And again, I would have to make sure that it's flush onto the other side. So in this case, I would have to drag it all the way over here and make sure that it's flush right there. Checking both sides, looks correct. And now I can open the door this way and there will be no overlap. So that hinge is very important, and that pivot point placement was very specific. And let's say you want the door to open even the opposite way. So let's say you do want the lock and the handle to be on this side, on the right hand side, but you wanted it to open towards you. In this case, it's not going to work, and I can't move the door anyway by placing it right here. It's still, the pivot point is on the opposite side. So because the pivot point is on the opposite side, I could scale the door on a negative value. So let's do -1 on Y. It's going to flip the door towards me, and you can see the pivot point is now on this side, on this bottom vertex. And I would just position at the 5 unit grid system, make sure that this pivot point is aligned and the door is aligned with the frame. And now I could rotate this door towards me and open it, and there will be no overlap and it will look correct. So that's one important consideration when you're using this door to make it work and to have it open and rotate in any way you want. Next up is the wall with the glass, with the window. So let me go outside and let me drag the window 300. So the glass is separate for the wall with the window. So you're not going to have glass right now. This is just an opening, and you would have to place the glass and the wall separately. And the way you do that is you just drag the window 300 and then you drag the glass 300. And the glass 300, you have a pivot point here in the bottom. And let me go ahead and actually increase this to 10 because it's a lot easier. Let me redrag the glass. And the glass just simply needs to be placed, snapped to the bottom of the floor at its pivot point and right here in the center, just like so. So these two pivot points for the wall, for the window wall, as well as for the glass, will be in the same spot. So you can see I'm selecting it, and the pivot point for both is in the same spot. That's when you know that the glass will be aligned with the wall window correctly, and it will be placed correctly inside the window wall. So that's how you place it. And then if you want to, you can just select them both and press Ctrl G to group them together. So now these two static meshes are together, and you can use them without having to place them individually. And when it comes to the door, the glass is already in there, so you don't have to worry about that. They're part of the same mesh. Next up, you have a small gap, a filler gap static mesh. And this is for parts where you have a doorway, or when you are trying to curve the hallway and create 90-degree angles and kind of expand on the layout to create more complex layouts. And you're going to find yourself, there's going to be gaps of geometry, especially when you're using a door and a door frame. You will need it for it. So right here on the bottom, you have a small piece of geometry. Let me drag this out. That's called floor gap. And it's a 20-piece unit that will allow you to place it underneath the door and that door wall in order to close up those gaps. As well as there's going to be certain layout placements of your corridors, of your rooms, where you may need it in between in order to maintain modularity. So if I delete this column, I kind of have one wall, the other wall curving to the other side. And when you start placing things and snap them together, you naturally going to get certain parts that are going to be missing. 20 units, because the thickness of the walls is 20 units. And then when you start placing the floor and the ceiling, in order to maintain modularity later down the line into the hallway, everything kind of should be aligned together to make things easier. You can see the floor and the ceiling and the wall are all in one straight line. They're all aligned. And thus it creates small little gaps because of the thickness for the walls. And the 20 units, the gap floor ceiling piece, 300 by 20, just simply allows you to create and close up those gaps with that geometry. And then you can drag any material for the floor, for the ceiling on top of it in order to create some interesting transitions. So you'll need that floor piece, that gap for the floor and the ceiling in certain parts of your construction to make things easier to create with and to create more extensive hallways and corridors. And again, just simply take a look at this example map and just kind of select some of these meshes and see how this simple environment was constructed and where those pieces were used. And now let's take a look at the material instances. So if you go to the materials folder, you will find all the master materials you can open up and kind of reverse engineer further for how everything was set up in order to create the material instances. Everything is organized and commented out. So if you need to make any modifications and you know how to use the material editor, you'll be able to do so. Now everything down inside these master materials is propagated to the material instances. And that's what we're going to cover and take a look at all the parameters you can change to make changes to how your materials will look on your walls, on the floor, on the ceiling, and on everything else inside this environment. Small note on the M. Lambert material. This is a flat shader, a prototype shader that I often use, and it is a simple base color off-white, and I use this material during development of these meshes so I can see the simple white material on top of the static meshes as I'm modeling, as I'm blocking things out. So you don't need to use this, but I went ahead and kept it as it's a great simple material for prototyping and for blocking things out. Now by default, you will get this clean environment. The walls are painted off-white with shiny paint. The floor is shiny and metallic, as well as the ceiling. So are the columns and the glass. So these are the default properties and parameters being pulled from the material instances. Let's open up the wall material instance. Right here, MI walls and doorways. And let me make the screen larger. So the parameters you can change here are your albedo color. And let me make this slightly bigger so we can see the names. And the color can be changed for the top of the wall, then for the bottom portion of the wall, as well as metal wall color. Then you have ability to add dirt masks. So if you want to grunge things up, you'll be able to do so. And there are a lot more properties pop up when you enable this, and we'll cover this in just a second. Then you can make everything metal. So right now the walls are painted metal, but then if you want to make this section right here at the top, this main wall section, all metal, so it's more shiny and metallic, you can do so. Normal map intensity can be controlled here, as well as roughness intensity. So let's cover the normal map intensity first, since it's already enabled. So this allows you to have a bit of damage being applied to the walls and the columns, as well as the doorways and the windows. So the same material instance applied for all of architecture, for all the walls and the columns. So if you increase the normal map intensity goes up and the damage is being more revealed on the walls, on the columns, on all the architecture. So this allows you to have a bit more control for just kind of adding a bit more dense to your geometry. And if you want it all flat and clean and no damage being applied, just set it to 0. I like a little bit of variation, a little bit of dented damage, so 0.3 just gives you that little breakup. Then you can adjust roughness intensity, so if you want to make things more shinier or more dull, let's reset it to 1. You can change the albedo color for the top portion of the wall, as well as for the bottom. So the bottom portion is just a small portion right here. It'll be more visible on the columns. So if I go ahead and enable this and change it to color, you can see that you're able to have a strip of different color to change the design of your walls, of your standing architecture. And it changes on the columns right here on the bottom, as well as on the wall bottom right here in between the vents. So you can change this to anything you want to create a bit more variation of design, as well as changing it for the top. For the top is going to be the larger portion. And if you change this, you can see you have adjustments to be made, thus changing the look and the feel of your environments. You can then make everything metal. So again, as I mentioned, the wall and the columns and all the architecture is now metallic, with the exception of the vents. The vents are metallic here on the bottom, but this portion is painted, so it's not metallic. However, if you want to change it and make this metallic, just simply enable make all metallic and switch it on. And everything becomes metallic. And then if you need to, right now this is too strong of a color, so you can just make it a little brighter and maybe change the color more back to gray. And then let me actually switch this off for now. And then you're able to have dirt mask speed applied on top of your geometry. So if everything's too clean and you want to grunge things up, enable dirt masks on and off, and then turn it on. This will begin to display more properties. And the first one that I recommend you start going through is changing to a different mask if you need it. There are 3 different masks, dirt masks, that are being packed into a single texture, and you can choose red channel, green channel, or blue channel. And by switching to another channel, this will give you a different dirt grunge mask to use. And once you find the one you like, then begin to adjust other parameters, other properties for it. So if you want to change the dirt color, you can do so. Maybe make it a little bit more subtle, maybe add a bit more brown color, more yellow color. You can change the contrast and opacity of how that mask and that dirt appears. You can adjust the roughness of it. Let me increase this slightly. So a lot of times that dirt will need to be adjusted so it's not so shiny as it is on the rest of the wall. So if you want to have a little bit of that breakup and make the dirt less shiny, then you have ability to adjust roughness, dirt, intensity, and contrast. Let's increase it. You can see that it begins to make that dirt more rough. Actually, let's not mess with intensity. I mean, the contrast right now, let's just focus on intensity. So if I increase it, you can see that the wall behind it, the paint remains shiny, but the dirt begins to get more dull. And that's how the dirt usually should be looking on your surfaces. It should not be shiny. So you have two controls for it. And the contrast will simply work with the contrast of the mask and make that mask more or less contrasty. But intensity is where you should be going to adjust that mask and how shiny or how dull it gets for the dirt. You then have ability to invert that dirt mask. So if you don't like how one mask looks, you can invert the black and white values and invert the mask. So you just enable invert dirt mask and turn it on. So you have 3 dirt masks, but with ability to invert them, you end up having 6 different versions. And they will all look different depending if you want to invert them or keep them as they are. And of course, you go back through the settings for opacity and contrast to tweak them further. And then you have ability to change the offset and tiling of those masks. So if you need to move those dirt masks around, you can do so on X and Y, as well as increase the texture tiling for both X and Y. Thus, again, changing how the dirt mask appears on top of your geometry. Let me go ahead and reset everything, as well as turn off the dirt masks. Now, for the floor, you have the same or similar controls. So let's open up the MI floor, material instance floor, and you also have one for the ceiling. Let's open this one as well, MI ceiling. And let's make the screen larger. So let's take a look at the floor first. So you have albedo controls to change the color of how that metallic floor will look. You can change the albedo texture, and you don't need to worry about this. I added this parameter for the texture so you can swap it out, or I already swapped it out for you for the ceiling. And this is where the albedo texture takes effect because it's using the same material, but I just simply replaced the albedo texture from the floor to the ceiling. So you don't need to mess around with that property. You have ability to brighten and darken the floor if you need it. So change color and then brighten or darken it if you need it. Then you have the same controls for the dirt mask. So it uses the same texture masks, and then you would just go through and do the same thing you did for the walls if you want to add a bit more grunge and dirt on the floor. So I'm not going to cover these. You already know how to use them. Just go through and just change them and tweak it to what you would want that dirt to look like on the floor. Then you have your metallic switch. So metallic is on by default. So this is why you get in the metallic floors. But if you want to make that floor non-metallic, just switch it to 0. It has to be either 1 or 0, not anything in between. So set it to 0 if you don't want this floor to be metallic and use it as is. It just gives you a different look and different feel and effect for the floor. Or if you want to continue using the metallic floor, just leave it at 1. Then you have your normal map intensity. You can change the intensity for the normal map for the floor. I'll leave it at 0.5. And of course, roughness. You can make it more dull or more shiny. And the same thing works for the ceiling. Same controls. It's just I've already changed the albedo texture and the normal map because the ceiling has a different texture and a different normal map applied. So you can see the floor is this big metallic tiles, but when you look at the ceiling, let me go in the light, it's a different texture. And I already swapped these out inside the material instance. So you just have to go through and adjust the normal map intensity if you need it, the roughness, darken or brighten. You can change the albedo color if you want, as well as use a dirt mask if you want. And then for these strips right here, you can either continue with the floor, and let me close this up. So these strips right here, these are the 20-piece unit static meshes in order to cover up the gaps. But you can apply a ceiling texture or a floor texture or another texture I created called MI floor gaps, or not a texture, but a material instance. And it just simply varies the design for that gap. So here at the moment, I have the ceiling material instance applied. So I simply took the MI ceiling and dragged that on top. And this one right here also uses the MI ceiling. I could use the MI floor, the material instance for the floor, and just change the look of that. And I can drag this one right here as well. Or I can drag the material instance floor gaps. This one right here simply disables the metallic switch to 0, and I have a different color applied. Again, just it gives you a different look and the feel of that design for the floor and that for that gap. Kind of separates the rooms and the hallways with some interesting visual design. Let me go ahead and drag the MI ceiling back. I kind of like that look. And let's do the same thing for this one right here. So with just these base material instances, you have a lot of variety of how you would want to design and create that visual look for the corridors and the rooms you use in this Sci-Fi modular set. Lots of variety. Then you also, of course, have material instance for the door. Let's go ahead and open up MI door. So you have your door color, and I separated the door color and the lock color. So if you want to change the door color to something else, to a different painted metal, you can do so. And then you can change the color and the brightness and intensity, or brighten and darken for the lock. So the lock and the door are separate. So you have that full control of adjusting those two elements individually. And then you can brighten it, darken it for each of those. You have dirt mask as well. So if you want to apply dirt on top of the door and the lock, you can do so. Same controls, same dirt mask. Just go through, adjust it to exactly how you would want it. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off. You can make the door metal. So if you want to make that entire door metallic, just switch it. So for this one, I have a switch. It's either on or off. For the other one, you have to either enter 0 or 1. Don't do anything in between. You have your normal map intensity, and then you have your door and lock roughness intensity. So if you need to control and make the door more shiny or more dull, and you can do so for the lock and for the door individually, separately. And very last, you have glass. So let's take a look at the glass and open up the material instance for the glass. So the glass by default, here's what it looks like. I already changed a few parameters here. So a lot of them are already enabled and changed, but you can just reset everything. Here's what it will look like by default if you reset everything to default, and then you can begin to adjust. So you have glass control for color. So if you need to make that glass color a different color, you can do so. The wire color, because this is wired glass right here, these metal strips have their own color. So if you need to change it, you can do so, or maybe you can darken it. You have controls for refraction. This is how the surface gets broken up when you're looking through the glass. So at the value of 1.05, it looks pretty good, but if you increase it, you can see that it's beginning to bend the surface and how the light travels through the glass. I probably wouldn't go anything higher than the default. You can tweak it, but be careful with this value because it's going to begin to distort a lot more. I have metallic property enabled for this glass material. It's recommended that you have metallic set to on. It's switched on. And I went ahead and left this property as a parameter. You can switch this to off, metallic set to 1. It will begin to make your glass more plastic looking. So I left this, but you don't need to change it. I would recommend that you leave your metallic value to 1. This is what makes the glass look like actual glass. So I wouldn't mess around with this too much. You have your normal map intensity. You can adjust to make the glass more kind of frosted, I guess, and less if you want to turn that down to, let's say, 0.25. So you kind of decrease the normal map intensity for the glass. Again, you have a lot of controls here, and you can change the look and the feel of that glass. You have opacity controls, so you can make it more see-through, or if you turn this up, you're not going to be able to see through it, and when it goes all the way up to 1, it's completely opaque. And anything below 1, you'll be able to see through it at various degrees. Then you have controls for opacity of the wire. Probably wouldn't change this one too much. You can adjust it, maybe slightly go lower. That wired portion should be set, probably set to 1 because that's completely opaque. If you go lower, it's going to actually begin to remove and make the wire see-through. If you turn it to 0, it's going to be completely gone. It still looks like it has wire on it, but it's actually see-through. So I probably wouldn't mess around with it too much, but you can adjust the intensity of it. So maybe a 0.9 if you want to turn it down and kind of have more of that control, so that wire is not so strong or that intense in opacity. And then you have your roughness intensity, how shiny or how dull the glass will look. So actually, let me turn up the opacity to 0.75, and then I can adjust the roughness intensity. Make it more dull or more shiny. Probably leave it at 0 because glass is shiny. And then you have offset and tiling. So if you need to increase the tiling controls for the glass, you can do so. Maybe set it to 0.5. I think value 1 looks pretty good. And the same glass is also applied for the door. So whatever you change here will also be applicable, and same values are going to be applied for the door. So again, the glass has a lot of controls you can change to make the glass look how you want. And the best way is just to experiment, go through all the properties and mess around with all the material instance parameters and experiment with the set and with all the materials, with all the instances. So a lot of controls, a great base mesh set to use. And I hope you have a lot of fun using this Sci-Fi minimalistic modular set to create with and to construct your environments with.